4.2 million active podcasts out there. Okay, so I have a few more statistics for the audience. There's over 464 million podcast listeners worldwide. These are active listeners who, by the way, the average listener is listening to podcasts 7 hours a week. So if I haven't convinced you, you need to be on a podcast. Keep listening. Hi, I'm Christine Rothdeutsch, and I am host of Make It Click. And today I have with me Tiago I apologize, Tiago Faria.
Yes.
And this is so difficult because Tiago comes to this podcast from Portugal. Tiago, welcome to Make It Click.
Oh, Christine, thank you so much. Super excited to be here. Can't wait to talk about the random experiment I did last year that
Oh,
completely shifted my
yes,
business. So it'll
yes.
be fun.
So now I just gave some statistics on podcasts and listeners, but our listeners might be saying, yeah, and like social media, you get all these statistics of this is why you should be on this platform or that platform. Why do you feel that podcast guesting is better than other marketing strategies?
That's a great question, Christine, to start off. And as you were saying, you did your homework perfectly. All those stats sound pretty reasonable to me. So the numbers are there, but also the fact that the podcast listener is a very different breed, if you could say it like that. So while the social media person, like audience, they're basically just scrolling through, their home feeds, and just consuming fast and looking for the easy gratification, and are very distracted, overly so many distractions on their side, and they usually a bit less implement. They have less of an implementing mindset. Whilst on the podcast listeners, it's a very different kind of audience because they like to go deep, right? They like to listen to long form content, listen or watch. They usually like to implement more. That they like to implement what they listen to. And also, there are lots of other statistics that say that podcast listeners have a higher purchasing, higher income, average income. So there's a lot of pluses on this area if you want to go on the podcast route. But also there's other wins you can get out of podcast casting, which we could discuss later on. But I love this strategy.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to bring up, and I hope the audience is paying attention that yes, all of these strategies, have their targets. And you say that the people that are listening to podcasts, and I never really even thought about it. I mean, I've been doing my own podcast for 2 years, and I never really thought about, the true demographics of people that listen to podcasts. But that is very interesting. And we have to really look at, well, where is our ideal client? And I guess if they're prone to listen to podcasts, then it's definitely a great marketing strategy because it's content. And content creation, we all get anxiety over that. It's like, oh, I have to write an article. Oh, I have to do this.
Yes.
Oh, but geez, being a guest on a podcast, oh, you have a conversation. Boy,
Exactly.
who doesn't find that appealing?
Absolutely. And I was there at that point. During long periods of time, I was feeling exactly what you described. Like, oh, I have to write another blog post, or I have to stare at the camera trying to look cool and interesting on the spot. And some people even spend an hour trying to create the most 1 minute Instagram reel, right? While you
Mhm.
could be having that hour talking to awesome person like Christine. And during that hour, you're basically content is being extracted from you seamlessly, right? Your most authentic, most genuine and best content, because you're very relaxed, you're having a conversation, you're not trying to look cool, you're not trying to make a show to a camera. So, and there's lots of wins you can take out of that 1 hour interview. You can leverage it for, first of all, you get access to new audiences, right? The audience of the podcast host, which is awesome, right? You get a 1 hour long form piece of content which you can use to warm up your cold leads or your email list, or people that are doing outreach on LinkedIn. That's, look at me being interviewed on this awesome podcast that you follow and that you admire, And since I'm being interviewed by that person, it means I'm an expert, an authority in this market, in the subconscious of people. Right? And then, yeah, lots of wins you can get out of this 1 hour process. Also, the networking you create with podcast hosts, which opens up
Mhm.
many doors for referrals for other podcasts. So I think it's the most abundant strategy ever, and it's the dream marketing scenario for me.
Right. Well, and I like it because as I tell people who are asking about doing their own show, and I said, look, I said, this is the one place you have total control. It's like and then as the host, you have the total control, and then as a guest, it's like you're getting out there. And now, okay, I've heard some stories that people have been blindsided by a question, but I think that's rare. It's rare.
Nice.
So it's more freeing than I know a lot of people who speak on stages at events, whether it's in person or online or something like that. And there's so many more constraints to those opportunities. And they are opportunities. It's totally viable, but you have to look at, each platform, each strategy, and how open is it for what you want to do. Now, before we get into your strategy about being a guest, you had alluded a little bit early on about your big experiment. Um, bef- you actually were a guest on a few podcasts, I think. How many podcasts have you been on?
Yeah, it was a crazy experiment I did last year. So during 4 months, I booked myself. I didn't record all of them, of course, that would be impossible. But I booked myself for 67 podcasts, which is an
Mm.
insane amount. I definitely don't recommend anyone to do that. I basically didn't do anything else during those 4 months. I just closed the blinders and started the process. But it was an amazing experiment because I learned so much by doing, right, and it opened so many doors, and did all the mistakes possible for sure at first. But then I got a lot of immediate feedback on what I was doing, and then I got lots of free coaching from podcast hosts because
Mm.
at the end of the conversations or during the pre-interview chats, like we had before,
Mhm.
many hosts of big podcasts for example, there was a lady that I could not go to her podcast because it was too big for me at the time, and I was trying to pitch myself, and she interrupted me and said, "Yeah, can I give you a piece of feedback? You try to give too much advice, generic information. That people don't look for that. People look for something unique, different, a hook, your story." So I started gathering all those informations and crafted my own specific strategy. And I was publishing all my interviews on my LinkedIn page at the time last year. And some people approached me asking, "Tiago, what the hell? Why are you suddenly everywhere? What's happening? Can you show me how to do it?" And I was like, "Aha! This is maybe a sign that I could add value to the market in a very new and refreshing way." And that's exactly what got me started here in this new path that I'm going through now.
Right. So you were there, you did it, you learned do's and don'ts, and now this is how you help people and help them to get on podcasts. So without further ado, Tiago, let's talk about your dream method. First, give us the 5 steps, and then we'll unpack each one individually.
Awesome, Christine. Thank you so much for that question. So, yeah, the dream method, it has 5 steps for sure. The word dream. So, the first for D is design, and then we go to refine, and then we go to engage, and then attract, and finally the piece that I talked about, the multiplication. So, multiply the effect of each interview you go on to make sure you have increase all the opportunities possible in each interview.
Okay, so the first design
The
as a
design.
guest, where does design come in as a guest?
Yeah, exactly. So it comes back to the piece that I was talking about, just the feedback I got from that host of you're trying to be, you give too much advice, you're not being any, position yourself as someone different. So we need to make sure we position ourselves as amazing podcast guests, both for hosts, we need to capture their attention, but also for our listeners, right? We need to be positioning ourselves as in an interesting, new, and a curious way, basically. So to make it easy for a host to say yes, because most people just give advice like I was doing, share information that doesn't stand out anymore. People can search on Google or on YouTube for everything that so
Mhm.
that is not what will make you stand out from the pack. So what has to be done is to what we need to do is to in our for our exercise is to, first of all, create your own unique framework. Your proprietary framework is something that makes you stand out immediately, like the dream method I have. So it's
Mhm.
something unique to me. Like nobody can. I mean, people might be able to Google it, but it will be something completely different. So it's something unique that I created myself. Even though there's lots of agencies doing podcast casting, which is perfectly fine. There's space for everyone. But I have my own method, my own specific twists. So that's the first thing we should think about is to, okay, how can I position myself as having a unique way of working with people, something that is different. Find a hook somehow that is unexpected for others. Maybe a combination of two different skills that you had, a part of your origin story, like I shared my own story.
Mhm.
So this is very important for us to position ourselves as someone attractive to the podcast hosts. And then think about, okay, what kind of topics do you want to cover? What are the 3 to 4 topics you want to cover? Don't try to talk about everything. How can we define the questions that extract our story and basically, yeah, unpack our story in a way that adds content and value to people, but not just share information, right? So those are all things we could prepare and design. Also, the media one sheet, which is like your bio, suggested questions, and suggested topics with your information, which makes the life easier for the host and position yourself again as someone different, someone professional. So the design part is important as like the prep stage. Without it, the rest is going to be very hard.
Yeah, well, I hope the audience doesn't get scared off by everything that you just gave us because that's a lot. But I encourage the listeners to keep listening. So the second one is to refine. What do you mean by
Yes.
refine?
So this has to do with now the first D was for the hosts, and now the refine is more focused on the listeners that we will be interacting with. So refine is to get confidence and clarity on our message, so that it resonates with our target audience. There's a big problem that when we go on podcasts, which very common, which is to share a bunch of facts about our life, like, I studied here, I did this, I did that. That is boring, right? There's nothing engaging or exciting about it, and people kind of lose attention and will not listen to the rest of the podcast, and do not connect with us. So what we need to do is work on our origin story in a strategic way. So I love to follow the hero's journey framework. I'm
Mhm.
sure most people are
Mhm.
aware of it, and I adapt it to the podcast world to some small little tweaks, but the basics is there. So if you talk about your hero's journey, where you were before, what sparked you to action, and then how you met a mentor or a specific book you read or something that caught you on the path, that how it was to go through the journey, and then how you started helping others. So crafting your story in a way that not only is engaging for people to listen, but always with having the audience in mind. Okay, so how can I share my story in a way that makes it resonates with the audience, so that they feel like, yes, oh my, he understands me because he's been through something similar, him or a client or whatever. So that is mega mega important. And if we are going on good podcasts and we're screwing up things, we're not getting results, it means we're not storytelling, we're not telling stories, we're just sharing facts or a lot of
Right,
advice, which doesn't make us stand out anymore, right?
right.
So yeah, origin story, super important. And we
Yeah.
all have an origin story. We just need to sit down, think strategically. I have some prompt questions I can share at the end with your audience. I have like a worksheet. It's very easy to follow it. But we all have a cool story. We just need to think of it strategically.
Right, and we don't realize that that really is a huge connection for our listeners. People can then identify with you and say, "Oh my goodness, yeah, I experienced something." Maybe it's not exactly the same, but they can see themselves
Yes.
in your story. So okay, so let's move to number 3, and that's engage.
Engage. Yes. So this is where we start to connect with the hosts, right? We're already prepared. We already refined our message. So it's time for us to connect with the host in a way that attracts their attention and makes us stand out. The biggest mistake here when I was doing, when I was pitching myself to host, or when I see many people doing it themselves, is most people talk about me, myself. I'm awesome. I did this thing. I'm going to be an amazing guest. You should have me on your podcast. And this is a big mistake, right? It should be about the host. If we invert that thought and process and think, okay, how can I add value to the life of the host? How can I make his life more comfortable, easier? This is the kind of mindset we should be activating on. And then our email pitch should be exactly focused on that initially. So I like to make my emails very interesting, engaging, even fun, to not be comparable to those spammers, that are out there. That I'm sure you receive a lot of spam, Christine, from people trying to be on your podcast. So I love to be interesting, engaging. I listen to the last episode to try to capture something interesting and say how it resonated with me, to create connection with the host. And then I share how I could add value to their audience, like how specifically could I add value, or my clients, to the specific audience. And then I'll make the life of the host as easy as possible with the media one sheet, with examples of my clients' previous interviews. So all of this helps with making sure you pass the filters of the host. And then, of course, following up is important in a natural, abundant way. Not don't annoy people, but it's important because we are very distracted creatures, right? We're always busy. And yeah, so how I pitch my clients is listening, connecting, because people are thirsty for human, genuine connections, and they're tired of spam. So it's easy to stand out in that sense.
Right. Yes. Okay. So number 4 is to attract.
Yes. So this is where you attract your dream clients to your world, because it's very easy to go on these podcasts as well and have a pointless conversation with no logical next step. Okay, so this is what I was doing. I was at the end of the shows, I was saying, I don't know, follow me on social media or something like that. So we need to have a specific, concrete call to action that is extremely compelling. That is the logical next steps after people listen to you. There has to be something that they can implement right after. That they're excited to implement right after. Because if we don't do that, people will just ignore and go to the next episode or continue doing what they were doing. So what I help my clients to do is to create irresistible offers as freebies, even if they don't have assets. For example, my client Mo, he had only a free consultation call, which is a bit boring. Nobody really wants to have calls anymore. So to turn it irresistible, I ask him to focus on, okay, what is the outcome of that call, other than become your clients, right? They need to come out of the call with something interesting, compelling. So you put there a data scientist that makes a real consultation, and the person gets out of it with a specific plan. But yeah, it's very, and you'll see it, and you'll see it in action at the end of this interview. But basically, we need to have something that people are excited to continue what they learned in the episode, and that introduces them to your world.
Yeah, no, that is so important. It's important here as a podcast guest, but having a strong call to action whenever you're speaking. I see it all too often when people are like this guest speaker for a networking group. They got a 15-minute spot, and they just want to share their information. They just want to inspire people. Yeah. And I've been involved in numerous organizations, and I've been in the position of working with incoming speakers, and I know a few times I've brought it up to them. So what is it you want the audience to do afterwards? Well, I want them to be inspired. I want them to be healthier. I'm like, and I say, and will they? And they stop to think, and it's like, yeah, probably not. I said, so here's what you need to do. Yeah, and it's encouraging people to take that next step. And what is that next step? And it's different when you're on a podcast, because people just heard you for the very first time on this podcast, and it's like, yeah, do I want to talk to them, or do I want to follow them? But whatever that easy next step is so important. So that leads us then to number 5, and that is to multiply.
Absolutely. So this is where you leverage every episode that you record, and in multiple ways, not just the episode itself. So out of each episode, even before they go live, you can do this step if you want. Is to ask the host. I'm going to ask you actually to share with me the raw video file of the interview. So before even the interview goes live, so that we can start creating short videos of interesting parts of the interview, even a blog post if you want, or audiograms or quote cards, whatever. always giving credit to the host. It's important to nurture the relationship with the host. Always directing people to the podcast of the host, because we're here to contribute to the growth of the host podcast. It's all an abundant strategy we give and we take, because again, so most people get on an interview and they forget about it. So, but the period between the recording and they go live is probably the most profitable, because you could be leveraging it to create excitement to people. My podcast amazing with Christine. You have to see it. Here are some snippets, short videos. It's very important to keep working on it, on the relationship with the host, and because not only because of your own social media content and excitement for your audience, but also because that relationship is super important, and you can get amazing things out of it. I'm sure you love podcasting because of the networking you create, right? With amazing
Oh,
people.
yes. Yes, that's the beauty of it. Is I always say, when you're meeting new people, they're like, "Oh, can we hop on a Zoom to get to know each other?" And it's like, "Yeah, I don't got time for another
Awkward.
Zoom call." It's like, "Hey, can would you like to be a guest on my show?" "What? You have a
Yeah.
show?" "Oh, sure, I'll talk to you."
It's the best excuse, right, to create connections with people, even people you admire, right? As a
Mhm,
host, especially,
mhm.
but as a guest, it's also crucial to do it, because many things can come out of this relationship, right? The host sees you in action, here's your story, here's
Mhm.
the way you work with people, and then you can possibly, if you do it the correct way and ask the right questions, you can become even referral partners or create any partnership of some sort, because you're in the same area, same niche, especially. Or that a host can refer you to other hosts and other podcasts, and you can multiply this effect. Or sometimes it even happens that the host or the client can become a client of each other, right? Because they get to know and like and trust each other, and create an amazing relationship. So it's crucial to keep nurturing, giving attention to the host, sharing things, helping, being there to contribute for the growth of the podcast.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. So it's the dream method that Tiago has for our listeners. So Tiago, this has been just a wealth of information. Again, I want our listeners to not be overwhelmed. It is totally doable. Um, and anything in the very beginning is going to take time, absolutely. But as you say, like those first pieces of figuring that out, once you've got that, and then you start to get booked on shows, then it's the easy part of
Yeah.
showing up and being a great guest, and really helping to promote the show that you're on. As you say, just don't, okay, I did that show and then just disappear.
Yes.
Too many
So
people are
common.
just trying to hit as many shows as possible. Maybe they've got a book coming out or something. They just want to get around. It's like, and well, no, that's not what it's about. So yes, it's very, very good message. So Tiago, this has been absolutely wonderful. How can people get in touch with you? Do you some place that they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Very simple. I'm all my presence, online presence is now focused on LinkedIn. So I can share with the link with you later on. But I've also set a bunch of things for your listeners for free, because I know how hard it is to get booked. To impress the host, to know exactly how to be an amazing guest. So, and people don't have to go on 67 podcasts like I did to figure it all out the hard way. I already cracked the code, so I'm going to share it with you, so you can start the right way, right from the get go. So first, I'll give you access to my free Being an Amazing Guest worksheet that I use with my clients. And if you complete that, you'll immediately position yourself as an attractive guest that stands out, and become an easy yes. So it's very easy to fill that form. Of course, it needs to be worked on. It needs to put some thought on it, because it's basically repositioning the way you talk about the way the services and products. But I'm also going to share with you the origin story worksheet, and where you simply have to answer a few prompt questions, that follow the White Hero's journey framework adjusted to the podcast world, in a way that resonates with the listener, keeps their attention, and generates the trust that you need for them to be ready to get the next step at the end of the podcast. And this is exactly where most people screw up, including me. Stories don't come out naturally to me. Sometimes I need to force myself. Okay, stop. Deactivate the teacher mode. We always have the teacher mode on, right? So for a bit, okay, tone it down, wrap your content in some stories of yourself or of our clients, and super important. And finally, I'll share also the email template that got me booked on those 67 podcasts, and got a lot of answers of hosts saying this. I usually don't answer these emails, but I have to say this is one of the best I've got, or it makes you stand out, and go through the filters of the hosts. And to access those, you see the link there, tiagofaria.pt/gift. You'll go to my LinkedIn post, and then you can just ask, you can comment on it, and just send me a message, and I'll share with you all these resources.
Awesome. That's amazing gift for the audience. I better take you up on that one. But I just want to finish up with one last question for you, Tiago, and this is about you and your business. Now, I know you've shifted from being the podcast guest to helping people to be a guest on a podcast. But in the time that you've been working in your business, is there anything that comes to mind that you know has helped make it click for you in your business? Now, maybe it's something we've already spoken about you with some of the tips that you gave us, but what comes to mind when you think about something that is really that thing that keeps coming to mind, like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I learned that, or maybe it was a piece of technology.
Technology. Could have been a piece of technology, but no. We actually don't need too much. Just in a decent mic, some headphones. That's the minimum. But I think the biggest piece of advice is really the way you show up on podcasts. You cannot just be there telling things and giving advice and then going on with your life. No, you have to story tell. You have to explain why you do what you do, what brought you here, why you just another coach, why should I trust you and not all the million of others alternatives there. And that all comes down to who you are, your uniqueness, what makes you unique, what makes you stand out, and that's your story, the way you came to do what you do nowadays, because that's exactly what generates the most amount of trust from people. And it's very easy to do. I mean, it needs a bit of practice. It needs a bit for you sitting down and thinking exactly what brought me here, and think that and write that in a way that also resonates with the person listening. Okay, so I think storytelling was it really is the game changer in this podcasting world, and I think in any part of marketing in general. But I think that would be the main outcome.
Well, thank you so much for that, Tiago. And thank you again for being a fantastic guest here today on Make It Click.
Thank you so much, Christine. True honor to be here. And I hope people take some